I feel like my father was on the run. I don't ever recall a single moment of fondness. Just sort of second nature to me. Like, this is what the normal is. Sort of to kind of break this down psychologically, I've been in a state of fight or flight my entire life.
Okay. So do you want to get into that?
Humans in general are very good at sitting with pain and trauma. I broke that cycle. Go out there and find your gift and start giving.
Welcome to the Love Means Business podcast. On this show, we celebrate love as the beautiful, sometimes dangerous, and always powerful force that it is. I'm your host, Emily Green, an agency founder, business consultant, professional speaker, mom, wife, and survivor of toxic love. From the highest of highs to the lowest of lows, on each episode, we will explore true stories of dark love and how sometimes our personal struggles can lead to our greatest professional passions.
Thank you to episode 2's sponsor, EYT Photography. EYT Photography specializes in headshots and personal branding, helping you create a visual identity that truly stands out. Edna Geller uses her expertise to capture your unique professional personality, making sure your message connects in today's competitive market. Working closely with you, she crafts a visual story that enhances your brand's perception. With eye-catching, high-quality, and impactful images, you'll boost your credibility and open doors to new opportunities. I want to personally thank Edna and EYT Photography for creating the beautiful images you see me using to promote the Love Means Business podcast.
All right, you ready to do this?
I'm ready.
Okay. Welcome to the second episode of Love Means Business. I am so excited to have Deevo Tindall on this episode today. And I can read your bio or you can talk about yourself for a little bit. It's up to you.
You're the host. I'll just follow your lead.
All right. Well, I will read this amazing bio then. And you feel free to just jump in and be like, no, that's not right. Just tell me. Deevo is the host of the Branding Laboratory podcast and a trailblazing entrepreneur on a mission to transform the world of branding and marketing strategy. After 2 decades in the corporate world, Deevo found his path as an entrepreneur, partnering with individuals and small businesses to crystallize their brand message and connect deeply with their audience. As a full-time coach and self-confessed branding rebel, I feel like I should have wore like a leather jacket or something now.
I should have worn a red leather.
Yeah, we both look a little bit like corporate here, right?
Oh, my shoes are not conservative.
That's true. Deevo specializes in redefining brand narratives with a focus on innovation, authenticity, and emotional connection. His unique and often unconventional approach combines compelling storytelling, social media mastery, and stunning visual content to create memorable brand experiences that make an impact. So we're going to be talking about your journey today, specifically about your family, relationship with your father, and how you learned from that and its impact on where you are today.
Well, we're going deep.
We're going deep. So we're just going to dive right in.
This is my water.
That is your water.
You can get teary-eyed.
I have Kleenexes over here too. Okay,
I'll tell
you're good. You'll be okay. This is a safe space.
Okay.
So
it looks really safe.
Yes. Before we jump into anything, I need to know about your name, Deevo. How did you get this name? Is there a story behind it?
Yeah, I don't know if there's much of a story. It's not very terribly interesting, but ever since I was a little kid, that's what I've been called.
Okay.
Sort of carried off. My formal name is Devin.
Okay, well,
So
that makes more sense.
Yeah, only my mom calls me that, and when she's angry, but I don't really truly have a true story behind it. It's just kind of that gift.
It's a nickname that you got.
Yeah, it's just kind of carried with me ever since.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry to disappoint you.
I mean, that's fine. But I know what to call you now if I get angry at you later in the interview.
Only reserved for one person.
Yep. All right. So we're here to really dig deep. And
Not angry, it's love.
Well, there's 2 sides to love. We're going to talk about, many sides to love.
The polarities.
Correct. So I want to kind of rewind the clock. And, I know a little bit about your story, but a lot of people don't know. We need to kind of, build up to that. So tell me about your childhood. Where did you grow up? I know you have a lot of siblings. So how many siblings do you have? Let's just kind of start there.
I was born in Colorado Springs to be precise. I have 11 brothers and sisters. and 9 of them are girls. 2 of them are boys. I'm dead middle, number 6.
Wow. So
I got the best and the worst in both worlds on either side. I like to say the best. My parents finally figured out some things, and then at that point they're like, we don't want to do anything else. Just let them run. Yeah. So I think that answers that question.
Okay, so you grew up in Colorado, and did you live there pretty much your entire childhood, or did you move around at all?
I joke half kiddingly, because I don't know the truth of this, but I feel like my father was on the run, because I lived all over Colorado.
All over, so not just like one part.
Yeah, no, I think but before I got to college, I think maybe 15 different homes. So I'm not really sure what's going on there.
Was he on the run actually, or?
I don't know. After that first 6-year expanse.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would be, if you had to pick like one of your favorite childhood memories, what would that be?
That's a tough question to ask to jump right into this. I don't have a lot of fond childhood memories, to be honest with you. I think probably my grandfather was really close. I was really close with him, which was ironically my dad's dad, which later turns out to be that he wasn't my dad's dad. He was actually my dad's adopted dad.
Oh, wow.
So
when did you learn about that?
I only learned about it recently on my father's death.
Wow.
In the last 5 years, we found out about it.
I wonder why that was like kept, away from you.
I think there was a lot of reasons why we can go into that if you like, but I sort of understand some of that now. We didn't at the time, but my dad's mom was in nursing school and got pregnant from a doctor. There may have been, when I say pregnant, I'm going to use that term very loosely, because there may have been some improprieties that not necessarily in the old days were. So she was shunned by her family during the pregnancy.
Okay.
And I think because of that shunning, she didn't want that shame to be passed on to my dad. It was sort of like, I'm just putting 2 and 2 together here. And then, so her neighbor, which is my grandfather, actually took her. They were in Kansas.
Okay.
And so because she was kicked out of the family in Kansas, they were close friends or something of that nature. And he said, I will take care of you. And they moved to Santa Monica, California, which is
interesting. Okay.
And then my dad was born in California, and then he adopted my dad. So he became adopted father.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think there was a lot of shame.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
And I feel like you said back then, it was a lot less, like you couldn't just say, people weren't as open about those things.
Oh no, yeah, especially like in the area and the construct that they grew up in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, it's interesting that that's kind of the dynamic that your father grew up in. Not to dive right into that, but I wonder if that had anything to do with his kind of personality or his deal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm just now beginning to sort of understand the idea of epigenetics and the sort of genetics and the role that plays and like our character and our development. So undoubtedly there was something in that. I do know that his real father was a physician.
Oh, okay.
Somewhere in Illinois. We apparently have a lot of family through them.
Yeah.
But again, because there was I'm not going to say it was rape, but
it sounds like
the story that
it's been glossed over, but like it was something close to that.
Yeah. And so who knows? He was an only child, which is another interesting thing.
Yeah. So he had like no siblings and ended up having 11 kids, which is a lot. Yeah. Yeah,
we're all make-up sex babies.
Okay, explain that comment. Explain that comment. You can't just throw that out there. Explain that.
My parents hated each other. My dad was abusive and very abusive to both my mother and all of the children. I don't ever recall a single moment of fondness or just, typically you're married, you're in a relationship, just holding hands and kissing and nice talking and just.
It was all anger.
It was always just anger and abuse. And so And on the counter side of that anger and abuse, there was always somebody that was born about 10 months later. So
there was passion, but not necessarily the passion we like to see. It was kind of that angry.
I guess you can call that passion.
I'm trying to make something good here, but wow, that's interesting. So your parents' relationship was, did you ever see any kindness between them, or kind of describe that relationship?
Nothing.
Wow.
It was nothing of kindness, no relationship was ever. It was abuse to the core, emotional, physical.
Okay.
Across the board.
So pretty much all of the above, if you can check with the abuse category.
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. And was that your whole childhood? You saw that with them, or like your earliest memories?
Well, my earliest memories that's the only memories I have. And again, for a long time, they said the 0 to 7 of the formative years. Mm-hmm. That was just sort of second nature to me. Like, this is what the normal is. And because we were all homeschooled, also, I don't know if I threw that in.
No. Okay. Now I have to ask you about that. Interesting.
Yeah, I was homeschooled up until 6th grade. And then, so there's a chronological order to this. So the older you are, the less schooling you had in the formal sense. Okay. They were more homeschooled. Well, my two oldest sisters didn't even go to school until they got their GED. Wow. And then from GED, they went straight into college. Okay. And then going down the list, I was the first one to actually formally go into school. Okay. At my age. And that happened simultaneously with my two older brothers and my sister above me. We all went into school at the same time.
So you went to school starting in 6th grade, or you went until 6th grade?
Starting in 6th grade. I was homeschooled up until that point.
Wow. So your very, very formative years, you were super sheltered then, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's an understatement of the year. The only exposure we had to anything, I played youth sports through the YMCA or something of that nature. And so I had access to other kids at that time, but it was only in go to practice, play your game, come home. We weren't allowed to have social friends over or anything.
Hello. Sure. That hits a nerve with me with my story, because I was pulled out of school twice in homeschool.
Oh wow.
So
at what age?
One was 6th grade, believe it or not, and the second was when I was a junior in high school, and I was homeschooled. Essentially, I was teaching myself.
Why were you pulled out?
The first time we had moved, and it was something to do with like the school system, and I don't even know exactly why. And then the second time in high school, there was a disagreement with one of my coaches, because I ran track and cross country, so sports was always one of my outlets to like get all my anger feelings out, And my mom, she got into some serious disagreements with the coach and just pulled me out. And I went to college early, which was kind of cool. So I did get like a bunch of college credit hours, but the isolation and like the loneliness when you are not with people your age was severe. And it was depressing, honestly, because all my friends were doing all this social stuff, and I'm by myself and on 30 acres in the middle of nowhere.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in DeSoto, Missouri.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, you're Midwest.
Super country. But I think that's interesting that there's like that similarity. And why were you homeschooled? Do you know, was there like a reason?
I was never officially told, other than, and some of it, I mean, if you look at today's education system, some of it's probably a blessing, because when I did when I did go into school, I was considerably further along than any of my peers. Yep. From all the like basic markers, from reading and arithmetic and all the different things. From what I understand, my dad was disenfranchised with the education system, relatively ahead of his time in terms of conspiracy theorists. And, sort of centered around all of that space, just didn't want us to be indoctrinated. He wanted to be indoctrinating. Yeah. So that is probably his primary impetus for it. Yeah. And he just didn't want us to be exposed to anything other than his ideologies, which were his own form of indoctrination.
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely that control piece where 100%. They want to be able to control like all of the education, all of the messaging. But it is funny you mentioned that, because I do think I got a better education in a lot of ways too.
Oh, for sure.
From my mom. Like, she taught me all the writing skills I have, even public speaking. She helped me with that.
For sure.
So it's this weird, like, again, dichotomy where you're kind of like, there's definitely some bad stuff, but there were some good things too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Again, and looking back, and I can say this now safely now, I'm throwing my therapy, but looking back, I mean, again, from comprehension to reading to writing, I'm light years beyond most people my age. Even today, like when I was in college, I was still light years beyond, writing at like an extra high level before I got to college. So, but at what cost emotionally? Because that space was just riddled with abuse and negligence and just all sorts of things.
So who taught you when you were homeschooled? Was it primarily your dad or your mom, or who was like primarily in charge of that?
Early on, it was my mother who did most of the teaching. I don't know what curriculum she followed, but we didn't actually, ironically enough, we didn't go through traditional schooling at the time. My dad, we mostly worked in my dad's business at the time. And then we would have homework assignments as like our break from working for my dad. We would have to do reading and writing and math and things like that.
Interesting.
And we read from like really old school classic novels. So we weren't allowed, like at 4 years old, I'm reading McGuffey's Readers type of stuff. So
So in some ways you were like more mature than like anyone even close to your age, but then socially probably not at all.
I'm still socially awkward.
Yeah. Too. I wonder if that's what it's from.
I've studied this deeply, so it's 100% what it's described, because those 0 to 7 years are your parents, they are everything.
Yeah.
And that 7 to 14 range, now that's where your peers typically would enter the scene in most models. And it's in that 7 to 14 range, it's just sort of interactions and social dynamics and where do you fit in the role of everything. And if you don't have any of those formations, you sort of have to fall back on what came before. And then what came before, if that's destructive or bastardized, like in my case it was, like that becomes your contextual model for everything. So 100%, I've learned to kind of like deal with it and develop my own sort of social dynamics around it. But 100%, I mean, to this day, I am socially awkward in most situations.
I was painfully shy, like until probably, I don't know when I left my family, like left. I was probably 23. I mean, I was so shy I couldn't order pizza like on the phone. Like I would be afraid to like whack when you had to call and order before there was DoorDash. And I would be like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't know the person. And I look back and I wonder if that's because there was this like fear of God or whatever put in my ear all the time about other people. Like, don't trust them. So I was really scared of anyone I didn't know that wasn't like part of my circle.
Interesting.
Did you have anything like that where you kind of had?
No, I have a completely different dynamic that was instilled in us. We were heavily, sports was a huge educator for me, which I think is a fantastic model for if there is justifiable support from your family structure that doesn't bastardize that idea. But we were taught to be very competitive.
Okay.
So I've had to learn to sort of overcome that model. But my model was based upon we're better than everyone else and people are inferior to you. And so my model was completely different.
Interesting.
And so I've always had a lot of confidence and self-confidence in that regard. But I've learned in my adult life that most of that was a projection, a false projection, because deep down inside, I had a lot of feelings of insecurity and worthiness and that sort of stuff, which I've now dealt with and still, I'm like it's an ongoing process. Right?
Yeah, I don't think you ever completely get over it.
100%. So I didn't have any problem with sort of showing up in that capacity, but when I showed up in that capacity, it was sort of like, I'm better than you type of model. And that's what was that was literally what was, no pun intended, but beaten into us from day one.
Yeah. Interesting. I feel like I tried to overcompensate for the things that I felt I was lacking, like being socially shy and awkward and all that. So I went like as close the other way as you can. Like I just went for it. I was just like Miss Social, like getting out there, dating everybody, doing all the things. Because I was like, I'm not going to be sheltered anymore. Did you feel any of that? Like once you finally, and we'll get into like more of that. But like, was there any overcompensating to try to make up for these things you knew that you were taught that maybe weren't right? Does that make sense how I worded that?
I think it makes sense, and correct me if my answer goes down the wrong trajectory. I think most of my life I've had to overcompensate for all of the lack of like true emotional development and nurturing and kindness and love and things that I don't think were fostered in me at an early age. I've noticed in the last few years through this work I've been doing with my mentors and therapists that I do overcompensate and have a need for validation. And I've always had that. I never understood what it was. because I didn't get any love when I was a kid, and I was in a constant state of competition. Like, just sort of to kind of break this down psychologically, I've been in a state of fight or flight my entire life.
Yeah.
Like hyper vigilant to the core.
Right.
And there's so many reasons for that. I don't know how detailed you want me to get, but
you go as detailed as you want. We can always edit.
Yeah. Then I've been in a constant state of fear my entire life from day one, and I never understood that. But then, you go through regression therapies and hypnosis and all these things, and all these crazy stuff starts coming out and bubbling to the surface, and you're just like, wait. It's hard to even believe that when I hear these things come out, and I'm like, wait.
Like that happened?
Wait, what? That actually happened to me? So, overcompensation, insecurity, need for external validation, just all of it kind of is just par for the course if you come up in the background like you and I have come up with. So,
when you're talking about these crazy things that have come up, I have to ask you some examples. So, when you went through some of these things, like the, what did you call it? Some of these therapies that pulled it out of you.
Regression therapy. Okay. Yeah, there's all sorts of different things, modalities that I've gone through.
What are some of the things, these like hidden memories or whatever that came out of that? As long as you want to share, you don't have to.
Yeah, no, I've talked about some of this before on my podcast. Some of it is pretty gory, and I don't know that I'll go into terrible details. I don't know if it adds any value, but extreme abuse, emotional, physical, a lot of deprivation and things of that nature. Lockdowns. We talked about lockdowns in the last 3 years. You don't know what a lockdown is, like literally locked in spaces, and
what caused you to be locked down? What would cause that?
Yeah, I don't know, really, to this day. I mean, there was always a reason that one of us was in trouble for something. Like, again, we were in a constant state of survival, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It could be the slightest thing set him off. We were chewing too loudly at the table, or he used to make us do like a Bible study every night. You'd have to sit in the living room as a family, and each one of the children would have to take turns reading scripture, and then we would have to interpret the scripture. I'm like 4 years old, and I'm interpreting, Hebrews.
Yeah.
Like, what do I know about Hebrews?
Right.
And if he didn't like our interpretation, we would get abused. There was like just horrible things that happened. So, I can share details if it's really important to the story, but.
No, I think that's
we'll ease in softly.
We'll ease in. We'll get into more of that. It's so, I keep saying interesting, but it is, because whenever I talk to people like you, there's these like similarities. Obviously, it's different. My story is different than your story than everyone's story is a little different. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that was done to me quite a bit too was, we didn't call it lockdown, but I would get restrained from leaving. Mm-hmm. So I want to leave, and it was as an adult, I was like over 18 at this point. And I would be upset because, I'd be getting yelled at and screamed at and called all these terrible things. And I would try to leave, and I wouldn't be allowed to leave. Like, I would be physically restrained from leaving. And I still get anxiety from that, thinking about it. And I think that's also why I've been so fiercely independent. Because I'm like, I will never let that happen again. I'm not going to get like locked down or locked in or whatever. Have you experienced anything like that where maybe even certain things trigger you because of that?
Yeah, I think my triggers are more centered around emotional than I think physical. Again, I'm an interesting case study because on the one hand, I was physically abused and emotionally abused, and I have all sorts of psychology that goes along with that baggage that is still being unpacked today. But at the same time, I was also, because I said, and I can't understate this enough, because I was thrust into the arena of sports from a very early age. Mm-hmm. I played college football, so like I've been in that capacity from day, like literally 4 years old, and even before that, I had older siblings that were all athletic, and so I will say that while I had all this emotional damage going on, I also always had this escape where sports was sort of. Yeah, so I was able to sort of exercise demons. I didn't know I was doing that at the time, but I also had this way of like getting my aggression out. And because I was good at sports, sports sort of carry this sort of vernacular and this kind of like ideology with them. You don't get picked on if you're a good athlete type of thing. Yeah. So I never had to deal with any of the social stuff. Even when I went into school for the first time and it was terribly awkward and didn't really know how to talk to anybody, I was a really good athlete, and I was like, so I was already viewed as like, okay, he's untouchable type of thing.
Don't bother him, don't mess with him.
Yeah. So I had like, so what happened, which is crazy, is that because I had to survive in this world, but I didn't have any tools to survive in this world now, I had to start making up projections about who I was. And so I started I'm only able to say this now when I look back. I was basically living a false projection or a pretense of who I actually was, because deep down inside I was terrified to be in the real world.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know that. But it sort of becomes like your second personality. It's like living in a bipolar body, but you're not really bipolar.
Yeah, I think it's hard to figure out who you are if you've had really controlling parents, though, because they...
Parent.
Yeah, sorry.
In my case.
Mine was too, honestly. I'm just clarifying parents, like, because we both have parents that were like that.
Yeah, my mother was basically treated as one of the children.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
My mom was the controlling one. No, you're fine. My mom was the controlling one, and my dad was, like, just not... He was there, but had no say in anything. So it's completely reversed.
Complete role reversal.
But I do think it's interesting because it's been really hard for me to figure out who I am in the confidence piece. Like, I am confident now because I've worked really hard to be like, okay, who am I? But it was like little things, like even like, how do I want to dress? What do I want my hair to be like? All of that stuff. I was so used to being told what to do with everything that it just felt really uncomfortable to make decisions. Did you have anything like that?
100%. I will say, in whatever defense of the mechanisms that we were taught, I have always had an ability to sort of be a rebel in this space.
Yeah.
I don't really know what that was. My mother said it was a gift from God and the angels were sort of keeping me separate, but I don't mean that to be vain. But of all of my siblings, I was always one of the few that always rebelled and fought back. Like, nothing ever made sense to me. And I remember questioning it on a regular basis, and I would get beaten for questioning it. But I'm just like, okay, you're just sort of proving my point.
Yeah.
It's right. Like, if I can't ask
validating me.
if I can't ask questions for some justification on this, then you're literally telling me that I'm on the right track here. Yeah. So I've always been in that space, and I don't know why. And it's kind of you in your intro of me, you called me a rebel. I don't know if I'm a rebel or not, but I've always sort of been kind of an outlier in how I view things.
Yes.
And it's been what's helped me in my professional world, because I kind of like always had like a unique disposition or personality or opinion about something, and whereas most people are kind of afraid to do that. So on one hand, it created this, like, I call them my monsters inside of me, but I had good monsters that were also helping me sort of like stand out in a sea of sameness. And so, like, I don't know where that came from. Maybe in his sick, diminished way, that was the method to his madness. I'm not sure, but I did develop some assets from all of this that I don't think most people possess.
Do you think it made you more fearless?
100%.
Yeah.
Because I was constantly fighting for my life. And truly, and like, I mean, I would take blows from my mom type of stuff. Like, I would step in and like defend my mom from. And so I was always, and I learned to be a good fighter, by the way. I boxed in college as well, just because I needed some space to sort of get that aggression out. And so, I think it has made me fearless in that regard.
When did you, to your best knowledge, when did you first realize, like, something's not right with my dad? Do you remember, like, a certain point?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I guess I have to sort of frame this with, I think I'm now starting to learn that I've repressed a lot of memories because of the trauma around them. So that's why I'm doing the types of work that I'm doing with my therapists and my coaches and stuff, because I'm now unpacking all this. So I don't really remember a lot of things that actually happened in that space. They're secondhand stories or things that come out in therapy. But I do recall there was an incident when I was probably between 6 and 7 years old. I'd gotten in trouble for something. I forget what it was. And my dad was like chasing me around the house. And and I was really elusive. Like, they used to call me Monkey because I could like scale furniture really quickly and stuff.
So you're very adaptable as a kid.
And he couldn't catch me, and I was like, I'm not coming down. I'm not just going to let you like grab me and beat me.
Yeah.
So he called my two older brothers, which are like 10 and 12 years older than me at the time, and had them help corner me. And I just remember thinking, what kind of a parent would do something about me? I just remember, and I don't remember thinking it at the time, but I do remember thinking it now clearly, like, and they held me down while he would beat me. And I just remember thinking, there's no way in hell that this is normal behavior. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not what parents are supposed to be doing.
No, and don't make your other kids to be part of that.
It's like, we're now making them liable as well. Almost like aiding and abetting the abuse of your youngest son is just sort of like, there's something wrong with that model. And I don't, as a 7-year-old, I couldn't be like, philosophically speaking. It was just sort of like, something just doesn't work here. And I just remember thinking, I fucking hate this person. Yeah. And I don't think you're supposed to hate your parents.
No.
At least not till you're a teenager.
Right. The hormones. Yeah. So that brings up an interesting point that I wanted to make sure we touch on, which was like the sibling part of this whole dynamic. And you had a lot of siblings. I only have 3 siblings. So compared to you, I have like none.
Who are you in the lineup?
I'm the baby.
Oh.
Yeah, so I'm the baby. But
you're the forgotten one.
Well, we're the most special. I mean, the most spoiled. But one of the things that you brought up was, you had your father was like almost having them, not almost, he was having them help abuse you. Mm-hmm. And there were instances where in my past, my sisters specifically, I have identical twin sisters that are older than me.
Oh, wow.
And when they were still kind of under that controlling force, they were part of some of the bad things that happened. And
similar to my story.
Right. And so how does that work? Like, we've all gotten out, we've all moved past it, but it's still been hard to rebuild trust between all of us because of some of those situations. Do you have anything like that?
So across the board.
Okay.
My family is very cliquey.
Okay.
Based upon where you are in the age, mostly. Pay homeless men money to kick our ass to make us tougher.
Oh.
So I'm like 8 years old. I'm literally 8 years old fighting in a park, getting my ass kicked by a grown man. And my dad, I don't know how much money it was, probably, just $1 or a few dollars, but he would literally give them money and make them wrestle us. And of course, it's a grown, smelly, pea-lated men.
Ew, that's like,
and I'm like,
traumatizing.
I'm getting my ass kicked by a grown man. And so, and depending upon how badly you got beaten in this fight, he would take you home and match that to like never get beat. And I got beat up when I was 12 years old. Scott Porter, hello Scott, if you ever see this, he was my next door neighbor. We were playing a game of football, and I don't even remember I was guarding him or he was guarding me, and we ended up getting in a fight, and he just like beat the liver out of me. I was like 9 years old, 12-year-old, and then my dad brought me into the house and beat me again because I had gotten beat up in a fight. He was like, you don't ever lose another fight. Yeah. So that was his way of like making us tough. I've never lost another fight since then. I've been in a few. Yeah. But including with my brothers and my siblings, but we were always pitted against each other in every situation.
Like that competitiveness was between you all as well. And you weren't like a unified family together. No. It was like everyone against each other.
And we had this really stupid system in the house. He called it the pecking order. So based upon where you were in the age category, you had priority and precedent over anything, including like, let's say we're going to sit down in the living room. If I wanted your chair, I had to wait till all of the older siblings recused themselves from that chair before I could sit it. Or in the case of like, let's just say in an off chance we had a box of donuts. Nobody could have donuts if you were younger until the olders had it. And my dad could come in and kick anybody out of everything. And if you didn't give him the opportunity to have it first, then you would get in trouble for that. And so this pecking order like was throughout the entire ecosystem of the family. Mm-hmm. And so you still see it today when we do occasionally get together as family members. I noticed this because most of my other family has not gone through therapy. People fall back into their old habits of who they were as a child and this like model that they had. And so it's like it's a wacky dynamic to watch.
Yeah. You and I have talked about like the gender, how it's different with the genders and how you have coped with things versus like your sisters. What are some of like the noticeable differences between how you and your brothers have dealt with things and versus your sisters?
Well, my father's was very misogynistic. So everything, females were inferior in every situation. It was very racist. a whole bunch of other, phobias or titles you can give. I don't even know what the term is for that. We were sort of always viewed as better than the girls. Mm-hmm. The girls, again, were inferior in every capacity. So to answer your question, that it was how have we handled this differently today as adults? Or?
So we had talked previously about, like I explained to you, like me and my sisters, we have tried for years. We always keep trying to make some sort of relationship happen. Mm. And my brother has been able to be more black and white with it. And it's just kind of like, I'm angry, I'm done, I'm nothing. He doesn't waver so much. And I believe you had shared that you had noticed some of that too, with like the differences of whether or not even some of your siblings believed that it was bad or not, what was going on.
I see where you're going. So, there's two parts to that. Well, my first belief, and I don't know how much science is, I do know there is some science around it. Just by genders alone, men handle things differently than women. Like
they do, absolutely.
I mean, that's the Mars Venus book. That is in general biology. Right. We're more performance oriented. Yeah. What's the problem? How do we find the solution? Yeah. Whereas women come at it from a more emotional and more esoteric perspective.
Like those memes where like women are all over here, and men are just like right to
just feed me and clothe me and give me some intimacy, and that's generally how we're
generally
speaking. There are obviously exceptions. I'm getting a little bit drastic on it, but in terms of how we handle stress versus how the women have handled stress and the trauma,
It's a big question.
I would say of the nine girls, 2 of them have removed themselves from the system completely.
Okay.
And don't really associate with the family at all. Mm-hmm. I'm also generally in that camp.
Okay.
Because most of the family, and forgive me for anybody who's watching this, I know some of my siblings do watch my shows, so I will say that not a lot of them have taken the time to do the work.
Yeah.
That is necessary for them to heal.
Yeah. It is a lot of work. It's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. It's expensive. It takes a lot of time. And I don't know that generally humans in general are very good at sitting with pain and trauma in that regard, and how they understand that I need to do this in order to overcome this. Like that is part of the journey. So that being said, I think everybody has dealt with it in their own way. But I would say that there's a large group of the sisters that, for whatever reason, they call it forgiveness, but I don't really feel like it is forgiveness, because, some of the stuff that happened to them is unforgivable in my opinion. But again, this is my opinion, so forgive me.
Yeah, no, it's your story, your opinion. So,
but they were just sort of like, that's just dad. That's what dad does. And I'm sorry, being forced to run naked alongside of a car because you're 5 pounds overweight is not what any dad should be doing to their children. So, I guess that's a soft way of answering that.
Yeah, I find that whole gender thing very interesting, because it has been so different. Well, really with each person, I don't even know if it is all gender. It's just maybe personalities, but the way people deal with this kind of trauma, like some just are 100% I'm out, never talk again, and done. And others, I feel like, we just keep going back and trying over and over again. And it's just really, I find that really interesting, the dynamic with it.
I have an interesting theory on that, and not one that I can prove. But I do believe that, we think, we're all just part of our parents' DNA, and that's that. And there's obviously code replication to that. But I also believe that there's an independent aspect to who we are as humans. Mm-hmm. And that we do sort of come to this, and I'm going out there woo-woo for a minute.
Please do.
But I do believe that we come here independently, and that our vessel is our vessel, and that our parents were just people that were, let's just call it, just to keep it simplified, we were assigned to by our own choosing, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And so we came to this space to live out our existence in order to expand and learn and grow and become a better version of ourselves. And the experience itself is the reason why we're here. And part of the lessons that we're here to learn are through the vessels that we've also attached ourselves to. So our family, our friends, our bosses, or whatever, these are all experiences that we've called into our life in order to grow and expand if we're willing to. And so there is obviously a DNA element to this and an epigenetic level to this, all these sorts of things.
Yeah.
But at the core, I think each of us, including my 11 brothers and sisters, we were given a unique set of variables and said, okay, now is your opportunity to experience these variables based upon whatever understanding you have of this, and it's your job to expand those. So it's really the only explanation that I can come up with how 12 siblings can be completely different in so many ways, shapes, and forms, from our philosophies to our beliefs to our values to how we handle trauma to what we agree and disagree on. And if you were to sit with all 12 of us, you'll see some crossover, learned behaviors, but you'll also be like, how the hell do you feel this type of way about this particular...
Exactly.
So again, we can go way, way down that rabbit hole, but that's sort of like a high level understanding for me.
Well, I like how you worded that. That's cool. Well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I always like to mention, because for me, I think about like these defining moments in my life, and a big moment for me was the day that I finally was like, I'm done, I'm leaving, I'm out. And I left. I just got my purse and basically escaped. Where do you have a moment like that where it was like breaking point and you got out?
Well, I went to college, so that was probably my breaking point. I don't know that I saw it as a breaking point at the time. I just remember I wanted to go to college as far away from my dad as I possibly could. So I got a scholarship to go to college. I played football there, and so that was sort of, I don't know if that was a breaking point to me at the time. I just remember thinking, I just remember thinking I was on the plane, and I have a daughter who just went to college this past year, and she was terrified to go to college and didn't want to leave, and I have a really close relationship with her. So like the polarity of my existence.
Interesting.
Yeah. Like, don't think for a second I don't think about this on a regular basis that I broke that cycle, because I could have not broken that cycle, right? And so that doesn't mean that I don't have my own problems, but I just remember thinking when I was on the plane for the first time, I'd never left my state. I'd never traveled away from my family in any way, shape, or form. Right. I just remember sitting on this plane in awe, first of all, that I was flying, and like, wow, this is kind of cool. But I just remember thinking, I don't ever have to deal with that again, should I choose. Yeah. And I chose never to deal with it again. I actually never went home.
So after college, that was it?
That was it.
Wow.
I went back for one time during the divorce when my parents physically got divorced.
Okay.
Which is another interesting story. But yeah, I've never been home since then. So sad as that may seem, that was a part of my life that didn't add any value to my current state and where I was trying to go. Yeah. And so I just washed my hands of it.
Well, that was kind of a natural break for you then. You go away to college, and like you said, it probably gave you also physical distance and perspective of like, I actually don't have to do this anymore.
Yeah, that's true, but that's only my observation well after the fact.
Yeah,
at the time. I remember at the time, I just remember thinking I'm free and I don't ever have to deal with that asshole again.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my thought. I don't know if that would be one of those epiphany moments, but probably.
It doesn't sound like it was at the time. Maybe now.
Yeah.
Maybe we can call it that now.
Yeah.
And then it just like romanticized the whole plane ride, and you were there like freedom.
Yeah. If you want to go really deep and esoteric, my divorce is probably the defining moment in my life that I can look back on and say it completely altered the trajectory of my life.
Okay. So do you want to get into that?
Follow your lead.
What makes you say that? Like, what about your divorce? Like, explain to me what about that makes you feel like that was like your defining moment?
Because up until that point, I was on a treadmill.
Okay.
And I had funnels on and blinders on, and I was just sort of living a life that the consumerist world had taught me. And because I didn't have any mentors as a child and any fundamental philosophies and beliefs that I personally had developed through my upbringing as a child, my philosophies and beliefs as a child were based upon competition, be better than everyone else, fuck up anyone who gets in your way, and anyone who gets in your way.
Homeless people, anyone that fights you.
Anyone who gets in your way is a loser. And so like that was my model. And so I went to school and I got my grades and I always had a chip on my shoulder. I didn't do very well in college socially. I didn't have a lot of friends. All these things. I met this woman when I was home or when I was away on a spring break. And there's nothing wrong with her. She's a wonderful person. We just have different values and went different directions. She's the mother of my children. But I married somebody who was basically my mother.
Yeah.
She was overly protective, overly took care of me. Like she did all the things. And I was just like, I'd never really dated before.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, okay, I guess I'm supposed to do this. And so I married this woman, have 2 wonderful children from her, but there was never any like true romantic love. It was just sort of
Yeah.
like we were roommates who occasionally slept with each other.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of other stuff that I don't really feel like adds any value to the conversation. But up until that point, I had always been very successful at everything I had done.
Oh, gotcha.
I've always had success in everything. I got hired right out of college into a very prestigious company, was paid a boatload of money to do really nothing. Varsity, captain of the sports teams, all these things, I've always had success. But success by what measures?
Right. Yeah.
Success by measures that were completely skewed to me. And I don't say this to be like deep and meaningful and esoteric, but like my idea of how you're supposed to live your best life is completely different to how I view it today. And when I finally ended up getting divorced, all of this sort of came to a head and came crashing down on me. And while the divorce was exactly what I wanted and a blessing in disguise, I just remember thinking, now I'm a single father. I have to raise these kids primarily by myself because I have since they were 5 and 2 years old. And I just remember thinking, okay, something didn't work here for me. There's something wrong with this programming because I thought everything was supposed to go this way and it didn't. And then I got laid off from my job at the time. There was
A lot
all
of things happened at one time.
Yeah, man, it's like everything just snowballed on me. And so it was really sort of my come to Jesus moment for me. And there's this, I love this saying, I think it's Buddhist, when the student is ready, the messenger arrives. Yeah. And I just remember thinking, in the midst of all of this maelstrom of chaos, there was also like these little things that just kept coming at me that I didn't understand.
You think they were like lessons?
It's almost like spirits were throwing things at me and be like, bro, you now have a choice. Like you have been put, I'm getting goosebumps telling the story because I was put at like this threshold or this crossroad. And honestly, who I was in those times, I would not, I didn't know. I don't like who I was as a human. Yeah. I just don't feel like I was a very good human. And the things that mattered to me were completely not even close to what mattered to me today. And so I'm rambling, but I'll try to wrap this up real quickly.
This is awesome.
I was put into these situations where I was suddenly realizing that I didn't have all the answers. And I had failed at something that I was like, how could I fail at this? I'm like, remember, I have this ego that's the size of the fucking planet right now.
Well, it sounds like you were literally not allowed to not win as a kid. So.
And then I failed it, which is like arguably one of the most important things in your life. Like you now have kids and you have a wife and you have a family and you failed at that. Right. And so for one reason or another, I was put in touch with, like, I call them my angels, and they really truly were angels for me because I was, and there's one person in particular that literally changed 2 books and one person that changed my life. And I'm just going to say her name because if you want to look her up, she's just the most amazing, enigmatic individual. Her name is Christine Lang. Okay. And she's the body whisperer is who she calls herself. And she does these regression therapies and things like that. And I don't even know who put me in touch with her. To this day, I have tried to remember who connected me with her.
Whoever put him in touch, let us know. You see this.
Yeah, so I ended up driving up to Lake Norman. I was in Charlotte at the time. And she lived in this little tiny house, and I went into her house, and she made me sit down in a chair and close my eyes. And next thing you know, like I'm talking to my grandfather through her, and like all these strange things. And I'm exiting her house at the end of this, 3-4 hour session. And she's like, "Wait, hold on!" And she tapped me on the shoulder. And she's like, "He wants you to have these." And she handed me 2 books. And I still have them to this day, and I read them all the time. In fact, I just pulled one of them off my shelf, and I'm rereading it. And the first was Conversations with God, Neil Donald Walsh. Yep. And the second one was Pina Children When Things Fall Apart. And she's like, he wants you to read these. And that was literally the day my life changed to kind of like, I have a fuckload of work to do. But my entire trajectory changed from that day forward. So it was a really long story. But
well, I think I'll need to link those books for people to look at because it sounds like those were life-changing for you.
Well, they were life-changing for me, but again, maybe they won't resonate with other people because you don't know when the student is ready. That's I really truly believe that.
I always get phrases wrong, and I'm like, how did you get that phrase wrong, Emily? Seriously. All right, so part of why I'm doing this podcast is I like to show all sides of stories, and we've talked a little bit about some of the lessons you've learned. You've shared so many amazing ones already. But if you had to pick like one or two of the biggest lessons you've learned through all of these crazy things you went through, what would those be?
One?
One or two. Or if you want to share more, that's fine.
I guess for me, personal responsibility is probably the single most important characteristic that I bring to any situation.
Okay.
Because I was basically forced to live and survive in every situation without the help of basically anyone.
Yeah.
My siblings were pitted against me. I was pitted against them. My mom was useless, no offense, but she was just like one of us. And she was so abused emotionally and physically that she didn't have a voice. And so all of my siblings are very successful in various ways, but I had to learn to sort of become who I am on my own. I didn't have mentors. I didn't have teachers. I didn't have guides that took me under their wing. So I think personal responsibility. And then I think the second most important lesson is not one that I learned, but one that I was forced to develop because I didn't like who I was, is this sort of idea around you have to develop a self-awareness to understand how you want to show up in the world.
Yeah.
And if you're not showing up in the way you want to show up, and you can sort of sit back and reflect, this is a lesson that was taught to me recently by somebody else who is now my acting mentor, that what's the highest version you can imagine for yourself? And in that highest version, where are you currently sitting if there were like markers to sort of show how far off you could potentially be? And have some self-awareness and understanding that you're going to have to put some motherfucking work in if you want, sorry if I'm not allowed to curse.
You've already cursed.
If you want to, if you want to live to this highest standard that you have set or you believe that you can, bro, you're going to have to put some work in, man. Nothing is going to be handed to you. Yeah. And anything that is handed to you is superficial.
It's probably not that great if it's that easy.
Yeah, like that is, I truly believe, and this is where I'm going with this, in that self-awareness, I truly, truly believe that the core of all my cores, that the reason we exist is to experience ourselves in the process of this evolution or this growth or this expansion or whatever it is, because it's in the process of this experience that we actually learn these behaviors. We learn the things that we like and don't like. And in that process, we can become sort of like what that highest, whatever that highest thing is. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And I feel like a lot of the things that you've said are characteristics that make a really awesome entrepreneur. So I think you have to be fearless. You have to have a lot of personal responsibility, because when you start a business, it's not like you have an HR department, IT, you have to do a lot of this yourself, almost everything yourself when you ever start. So talk to me about that. How has everything you've been through with your family, all the things you've overcome, how has that set you up for the success you've had as an entrepreneur? Because you've had a couple businesses, correct?
Yeah, a few. I'm on my fourth business now. I sold 2 of them. I still have the other 2. I think my upbringing, I would say some variables and skills and assets that I picked up from that was discipline, competition, being able to sort of thrive in a really fastidious, crazy environment.
Yeah.
And because I played sports my entire life, there was innumerable lessons, and you know this because you're an athlete.
Athletes make amazing business people. I'm sorry, we do.
Yeah. I coach my daughter's high school lacrosse team, and I was just reading a story the other day because one of the girls on the team asked me, well, why are we even playing sports? And I was like, all right, how much time do you have? Right? But I saw this. But you know how Google's always listening. So later that night, I was on my phone and I saw a statistic, and I think it was Fortune magazine ran this story. I believe it was Fortune. And I'm going to mess up some of my numbers because I'm horrible with this, but it was like 60% of women in Fortune 500 companies that are in a managerial or executive role all played sports, competitive sports, through high school and into college. 60%. And then
Majority. We know a majority. I believe that.
yeah,
I
and
think
then
that's totally
and then there
true.
was one more that just like blew my mind. It was like 79%, and this was centered around women specific of this article. 79% of women that are earning over $100,000 or more annually in whatever capacity they're working all played through high school sports in the competitive capacity.
Yeah.
And so the whole nature of the article was like sports teaches you so many elements.
It does. Absolutely.
And that's not to say that you can't be successful if you didn't play sports. I'm just simply
Sure.
saying
I hope so. It definitely helps.
it definitely puts you in
Yeah.
a leg up on the
It
competition.
teaches you so many good things. I always say, because I always say I'm going to run on it. Like when I don't know how to do something or I have a big decision, I'm like, let me run on it. And I get my best creative ideas. I make my best decisions when I'm running.
100%.
Because I just focus and it's just, I'm in the zone.
Well, they talked about this idea of the zone or the flow state. Like when you are an athlete and you're playing at a high level, and if you can truly like excel at your craft, whatever that may be, the best way to excel at your craft is to sort of go into this flow, this
Like a
zone
different
state.
person.
Yeah, you like nothing else matters. You're like literally
It's amazing.
Yeah, you like live in this completely different ecosystem than everyone else, and every other athlete is also theoretically in their flow state. So I'm sorry to answer your question. I think fortitude, collaboration, learning to like work with people, obviously all the variables from sports, discipline, and habits, and just like perseverance, all of that add up to sort of, and I use them on a daily basis in my entrepreneurial life. So yeah.
So for anyone else that might be watching or listening that could be in a similar situation to what you went through with your father or with your family, is there any advice you would like to give them today?
Well, I guess it depends on who we're talking to. Are we talking to kids that are currently in an environment that might be 7-year-olds getting chased by their dad and 2
I mean, you never know. Probably
Go next door to the neighbor right now and tell him.
For kids, if you're watching or listening, you probably shouldn't be listening to this. But let's say somebody else that's in an abusive relationship where they're being controlled and, you know, they are thinking about wanting to get out, or maybe they already are out. But what is like some advice you would give someone?
This is not normal. First of all, this is not normal. It's not okay. And you should seek help immediately. And if you're in it, if your partner is abusive, physically, emotionally, in any way, shape, or form, you know, I think this is a conversation that you should probably start with them first. And if they're unwilling to get help, because there's always ways you can change and get help. I refuse to believe, I've heard people say you can't change, people just don't change. I do not believe in that. I do believe that people can change. If you have the personal awareness, self-awareness, and responsibility,
You have to want to.
you can change. But if your partner is unwilling, then you know you need to be able to have some strength and fortitude and get yourself out of that. Because if they're unwilling to change now, just imagine how that's going to exacerbate over time.
Right.
And then the second piece of it is like, this is not something I ever had until really the last 5 years of my life. It's really important, I think, that you find a group of peers or a mentor or a coach or an environment where you can surround yourself with people that can build you up and lift you up and teach you that there is a different way of doing things.
Yeah.
And if there's any one thing that's changed the trajectory of my life as well, it's that I started changing the types of people that I hung out with. I started surrounding myself with coaches and mentors and enlightened peers and mastermind groups and all sorts of different things. And you really are, there's a scripture in the Bible that says like when 2 or more people are gathered in his name, I mean, like you can call it her name, their name, whatever. But when you surround yourself with quality individuals, you are forced to elevate your own status in any way, shape, or form, from how you behave to your accountability to like your personality to the things that make you more successful. And so, yeah, I guess that would be my advice.
I love that everything that you said. I think there's a lot of really awesome lessons here that you shared. And I feel like because we have had enough similarities that I relate so much to some of the things that you said. But I know like what I would say too, just to kind of piggyback off that, is it's so important to have a way out, and sports can be that. Even if you feel like, well, there's no way I can, because it's my parents, like they're everything to you. Even when you're young, they are like everything to you. If you can find that thing, whether it's sports or it's acting or singing or whatever, that could be your way out. And it can continue to be an outlet for you your whole life, which is such a beautiful thing.
100%. I love that.
So
get involved.
Yeah.
Don't
yeah.
just like, what's your point of being on the planet? If like, I mean, honestly, like, I don't want to be esoterically deep on this, but like, what other point is there?
I'm gonna have to put the definition of esoteric. You've said that a few times, and I don't know what it means.
Well,
I'm gonna have to put that in the comments.
so esoteric is like, there's this deeper meaning to things.
Okay.
So whether you want to call it religion or philosophy, esoteric is sort of this idea that life isn't just like a linear trajectory.
Okay.
There is like a deeper meaning and a deeper purpose and a more philosophical aspect of things. And so
You're expanding my vocabulary.
there you go.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you. Is there anything else that you would want to share today that you feel would help people? Any other lessons or anything that you didn't talk about that you want to share?
I think that everybody has a gift, and if you haven't figured out what your gift is, it's worth some introspective time to figure out what that is. Because if you do have a gift, whether that's in education or inspiration or entertainment or whatever it is, and you're holding on to that gift, you're doing the rest of the world a disservice by not sharing it. And so, you know, one of the things that I do in my business is teaching people how to sort of expand on their gifts. And this is not a sales plug. I'm just simply saying that if you have something that you think is of value to the planet, it is your moral obligation to figure out how to share that.
Yeah.
Because if you can make one person's life better, whether they're inspiring them or educating them or entertaining them or just doing something that makes someone else's life better, I do truly believe you have a moral, conscientious obligation to do that. Because I do think humans, our best gift is when we come at things from a perspective of serving and helping other people. And so that would be my challenge to anybody listening is go out there and find your gift and start giving.
I 1,000% agree.
Thank you.
How can people get a hold of you if they want to connect more?
Best way is going to the website, brandstoryteller.com.
Okay.
That's simple as that. My email is deevo@thebrandstoryteller.com. But if you go to the website, you can navigate around pretty easily and find me.
Okay. And thank you everyone who is listening or watching. Make sure you are subscribing and following us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And remember, love is a powerful force that will impact your life in many different ways. Never let the bad overshadow the good. Keep loving, learning, and leveling up.
Brilliant. Thank you for the show. I really appreciate the opportunity.